The oak-paneled courtroom was heavy with silence, the kind that seemed to hang in the air just before a storm. All eyes were on the man standing at the defendant's table. His name was Michael Carter, a 34-year-old black man with broad shoulders, steady eyes, and the kind of calm demeanor that came from years of discipline. He was dressed in a simple gray suit, his tie neat, his shoes polished. To the jury, to the onlookers, he looked like any ordinary citizen. But Michael carried with him a secret that no one in this room, least of all the judge, knew. Judge Harold Whitman adjusted his glasses as he looked down from the bench. He was an older man in his late 60s, known for his stern rulings and sharp tongue. His reputation carried weight, but so did the murmurs about his biases, whispers that his courtroom was not always a place of equal justice. The bailiff announced, "All rise." Everyone stood, then sat again as the judge settled in. Michael stood alone. "Mr. Carter," Judge Whitman began, his voice dripping with condescension, "you stand accused of reckless driving, failure to comply with police orders, and obstruction. How do you plead?" Michael's tone was respectful but firm. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The judge leaned back, his lips curling in faint amusement. "Not guilty? Interesting. The officer's report says otherwise. He claims you refused to show identification when stopped." "I asked why I was being pulled over," Michael replied evenly. "It was a routine question." "Instead, I was dragged out of my car." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom, but Judge Whitman banged his gavel. "Order. This isn't a debate. The officer's word stands in this court." Michael clasped his hands in front of him. He could feel the eyes of the spectators burning into him, some sympathetic, others judgmental. He knew the drill. This wasn't the first time a man like Judge Whitman had assumed guilt based on the color of his skin. The prosecutor, a young woman named Dana, stepped forward. "Your Honor, the state recommends a fine of $5,000 for obstruction and reckless endangerment." Michael's brows furrowed. $5,000? "For asking why I was pulled over," Whitman sneered. "You think you can lecture this court? You'll pay the fine and learn your place." Michael drew in a slow breath. His patience was not infinite, but he knew timing mattered. For now, he allowed the scene to unfold. A man in the gallery leaned toward his neighbor and whispered loudly enough for several to hear. "Typical. Doesn't follow rules, then cries foul." Michael's jaw clenched, but he stayed composed. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Do you have anything to say before I pass judgment, Mr. Carter?" Michael met his gaze steadily. "Only that justice should not be handed out like favors, Your Honor. The law is meant to serve truth, not ego." Gasps erupted in the courtroom. Whitman's face flushed red. "Enough! I will not be lectured by the likes of you. You are fined $5,000 payable within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in jail time." Michael stood silent for a long moment, then nodded once. "Very well." But as he gathered his papers, his calm expression masked the storm brewing beneath. He wasn't just another defendant. He wasn't a man to be bullied into silence. He was a federal prosecutor for the Department of Justice, specializing in civil rights violations. And this trial, this humiliation, was about to become something much bigger than Judge Whitman could imagine. The breaking point as court adjourned, Michael walked out of the courtroom with his chin held high. Reporters waiting outside swarmed him with questions. "Mr. Carter, how do you respond to the judge's ruling? Do you plan to appeal?" Michael didn't answer. Not yet. Timing was everything. Inside, Whitman leaned back in his chair, smug. "That'll teach him," he muttered to the clerk. But deep down, a flicker of unease gnawed at him. There was something about the way Carter had carried himself, too confident, too composed. Not like a man beaten down. What Whitman didn't know was that Carter had already contacted the Office of Professional Responsibility. He had every intention of filing a misconduct report. And unlike ordinary defendants, Carter had the tools, the authority, and the network to ensure it wouldn't be buried. A community-divided news spread quickly across the city. Social media lit up with heated debate. Some called it another example of judicial overreach. Others insisted Carter should have simply complied. Videos of the hearing circulated online, drawing thousands of comments. Neighbors stopped Michael in the grocery store. "We saw what they did to you," one woman whispered, eyes wet. "Don't give up," but others were colder. "Maybe if you people just followed the law?" One man sneered in the parking lot. Michael ignored the hate. He had a plan. The following week, the courthouse buzzed with tension. Another hearing had been scheduled, this time to address Carter's appeal. But what Judge Whitman didn't realize was that Carter had come armed with far more than a legal brief. When court resumed, the judge looked irritated to see Carter back so soon. "Mr. Carter, I assume you've reconsidered paying the fine." Michael's expression was calm, almost serene. "On the contrary, Your Honor, I'm here to present new information." Whitman rolled his eyes. "This is highly irregular. But fine, proceed." Michael stepped forward and laid a folder on the bench. "Contained in this file are documented reports of your courtroom misconduct, cases where fines and sentences were disproportionately harsher for defendants, of color compared to others with similar charges." Gasps filled the courtroom. Whitman's face drained of color. "This is outrageous," he thundered. "You cannot accuse me in my own courtroom." Michael's voice was steady. "I'm not accusing, Your Honor. I'm presenting facts. And I am more than qualified to do so, because I am not just a defendant. I am Michael Carter, federal prosecutor for the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division." The room froze. Reporters scribbled furiously. Jurors whispered to one another. Even the bailiff's eyes widened. Michael pulled out his badge and held it high, the gold glinting under the fluorescent lights. "How about now?" he asked softly. The silence was electric. Whitman stammered, This is a trick." But Michael continued, "Every action you've taken here is under review. Every biased ruling, every abuse of authority. This case is no longer about me. It's about the integrity of this courtroom and the justice system itself." The prosecutor, Dana, shifted uncomfortably. "Your Honor, perhaps we should—" "Quiet!" Whitman barked. But his authority was crumbling. Michael turned to the gallery. "The law is not a weapon to be wielded against the vulnerable. It is a shield meant to protect them. And when judges forget that, it is our duty to remind them." The crowd erupted in applause, despite the judge's gavel slamming desperately for order. The collapse of power within days. National headlines blazed. Federal prosecutor humiliated by racist judge. Civil rights groups demanded investigations. The Department of Justice opened a formal inquiry into Judge Whitman's conduct. Neighbors who once doubted Michael now approached him with respect. "You stood up to him when no one else could," said a local pastor. Whitman, meanwhile, faced mounting pressure. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse. Old cases were re-examined. The walls of his power, once unshakable, now trembled. In a final, desperate move, Whitman called another hearing to clear his name. But when he entered the courtroom, it was Michael who stood taller. "This is no longer your stage," Michael said calmly. "The people see you for what you are. Justice doesn't belong to you. It belongs to all of us." The gavel that once silenced men like him now sounded hollow. The resolution weeks later, Judge Harold Whitman resigned under pressure. His legacy, once built on fear, was dismantled by truth. Michael, though vindicated, didn't celebrate. He knew the fight for justice was larger than one man, one courtroom, one judge. But he also knew this: silence is complicity, and courage can ignite change. Standing on the courthouse steps, badge gleaming in the sunlight, he told reporters, "The law is not perfect, but it becomes stronger every time we stand against those who misuse it. This is not just my victory. It is ours." The crowd cheered, voices rising in unity, and for Judge Whitman, the echo of that cheer was a reminder that arrogance, prejudice, and unchecked power will always crumble when faced with truth.